Hi, my name is Sam. Welcome to the channel. Today, I'm taking a look at my haul. So the purpose of this video, I'm just going to be showing some things that I picked up from the comic book shop. Hopefully give you guys an idea of some of the things that I collect. Kind of share some of my comic knowledge with some of you guys. Maybe you find some things that you may not know about, might be interested in picking up yourselves. Go ahead and take a look. I got a fat stack. We're just going to go through them real quick. Not going to look into them too deep. If you guys want to do a more in-depth look at them, we definitely can do that. Golden rule in comics, to me, is everybody should know, see Todd, you buy Todd. So these were two issues that I surprisingly didn't have in my collection. Todd McFarlane is one of those guys that I would put in a top 5 artists for me of all time. And obviously you can see here that these are both iconic covers, Hulk 341 and then the Spider-Man Torment #1. The story in the Spider-Man issue, it's not the greatest thing in the world. Rick Parker does do the lettering on this, and Rick Parker is one of my favorite letterers and just general guys that's involved in comic books. He's involved with the Beavis and Butthead comics, and I have a boatload of those, and we'll for sure probably end up taking a look at that. I have about every issue of that. But yeah, definitely would recommend picking this book up. So the thing with the Hulk, we've got Rick Parker on the letter. Artist there is going to be Todd. The printing in this version that I picked up is kind of wonky looking. It's definitely faded quite a bit over time, and there's weird lines and whatnot in the actual print itself. It's kind of like you can kind of see here in this panel, it's not the greatest looking print. As you can see, it's very weird looking lines and stuff in it. One of my favorite cartoonists right now, Peter Bagg, he did the Hate series. This is Hate Revisited, so this is a newer series of the thing. Kind of ironically, he put out the complete Hate, which collected all of the previous issues of Hate that had come out, and within the same year, he had a new series launch, which I think is kind of funny. But I really love his cartooning. A lot of this stuff is honestly really funny, and it's about a slice of life. So if you're in your late teens, early 20s, early 30s, I think that this book especially would really speak to you a lot. They talk about rent prices, just things that you run into early in life, and it's very relatable, and this is one of the reasons why I really like it, is just because of that. It's extremely relatable. So if you haven't ever picked up an issue of Hate or aren't familiar with it, I definitely recommend doing so. How I discovered the series, a couple years back, they had put out Hate Jamboree, and it was kind of a greatest hits / celebration of Hate in general. Peter at the time, he had stopped doing it, so it was just kind of a retrospective, I guess, on the comic itself. You can take a look at that, but that's how I discovered it. It's more or less just gives you background information, everything like that, on the book itself. Like I said, it's a retrospective on the actual series itself. Definitely recommend it. So we got Kabuki, Fear the Reaper, Act 1, Issue 1. So Kabuki is what I would consider a bad girl comic. Bad girl, is Lady Death, things like that. Sort of like an outlaw comic, but with a female protagonist instead. So when we get in here, you can see that if you're familiar with Caliber Comics, they were a publisher out of Detroit. They did things like The Crow. So a lot of black ink splatter and whatnot that you do see in their comics. This is no exception to that. It is absolutely beautiful. I see in back issue bins all the time, and I just never really bothered to pick it up. I've always been familiar with the series, but it was just you know, just I guess at the time I just wasn't interested in grabbing it. I don't know why I waited so long to get them, because these are badass comics. Kabuki. So I picked up a couple of Fabulous Furry Freak Brother books. If you're not familiar with Freak Brothers, about hippie culture, drug culture, they're underground comics from the 70s. That's exactly what it is. They're they're just a bunch of hippie dudes that kind of get around, you know, get stoned and do stupid stuff. I'm gonna do a fast flip through so you can kind of see, you know, some of the things that may be in these comics, and you can pause it on the, you know, on a particular page if you actually want to look at it a little more in depth. But one of the things that I love about the Freak Brothers is Fat Freddy, his cat. I think these are actually better than the Freak Brothers in general. They're basically an unfiltered Garfield. So if you think Garfield isn't funny like I do, unironically people like Garfield, and I get it. I recently picked up a Garfield book to actually, you know, give it a try. A lot of newspaper stuff is kind of out of my wheelhouse, so I figured, hey, you know, I'll pick up Garfield, you know, see what's actually there. Some of the drawings are okay, but the writing, it's just, I don't get it. It's so bland and sterilized. You know, there's a reason why soccer moms, you know, like Garfield. So if you have beef with Garfield and you want something a little edgier, Fat Freddy's cat, this is the way to go. One of the things you can notice about these Freak Brothers is they are all different sizes. This is something that you see in underground comics, is these get printed wherever they can get them printed. Underground comics were being sold in head shops, places like that. Normal comic book shops and newsstands wouldn't carry this kind of stuff. So whoever they could get to make it would make it. That's why they're super consistent. You could see this same issue that would have been printed a year later, and the coloring looks completely different because they had simply, you know, they had somebody different printing it. So Freak Brothers, there is a Tubi cartoon series for this. It takes place in modern times. Pete Davidson and Woody Harrelson and a couple other guys that do voices in it. It's not the greatest show, to be honest with you, because it does take place in modern times, and I think that one of the big appeals to the Freak Brothers is that it takes place during the 70s. So that drug culture makes a lot more sense during this time, because if you're trying to shoehorn drug culture into 2024, I really don't think that it really makes much sense, mainly due to the fact that, you know, it's been normalized at this point, so it's not edgy or funny. So Freak Brothers, definitely recommend to pick it up. Black Science #1, Remainder, Mateo Scalera, Dean White. If you're not familiar with Mateo, he has a YouTube channel that he does with a couple other cats called Ink Pulp, where, you know, they get together, talk about comics and more about the craft of comics itself. I've learned a lot there myself about, you know, drawing, inking, comic knowledge in general. And like I said, Mateo is one of the guys on there. I believe he's from Italy, and the dude is just crazy good. His art style, unironically, kind of reminds me of Steve Root a little bit, especially with his painting. I want to say that there's definitely a Space Ghost influence here, or like the old, you know, science fiction novels. Like this looks like a cover to like a old, you know, 60s, 70s science fiction novel to me. See some aliens influence as well, but the main thing that I love about this series is Mateo's art. The dude is just insane. And I'm not entirely sure how many issues this series had run for. I have the first 12 of them that I had picked up. Highly recommend them. Again, if you're not familiar with Mateo, I'll put Ink Pulp's link in the description there for you guys so you can check it out. Madman Comics #5. This is a Mike Allred brainchild. I love his art. It reminds me of Andy Warhol a lot. Very pop art style. There isn't a lot of comics that look like this. When you think about your stereotypical comic, like this is what I would think it would look like, and that's not a bad thing. It's I don't know, like when you would see a movie or something like that, and they would have a comic book in it, you know, a kayfabe fake comic book as like a prop. This is what the inside would look like to me. It's just very it's very striking and bold. It's not very detailed. Reminds me of Toth a little bit, especially with just the simplicity and whatnot in the lines. I really like this series. You know, Hellboy shows up in this issue here. Main thing why I'm into it, his drawing. I really love his drawing. So picked up a couple issues of that. I had done a order recently with good old Jim Rugg of cartoonist Kayf Fame. And this is, I don't know, the second or third order of books that I've got through him. Every single time that I do get books, I am surprised actually by the quality that you're getting. These are all self-published, so he's, you know, for the most part, printing them, stapling them, binding them, and whatnot all himself. So, you know, got to give a shout out to Jim for that. This is called Comic Stub. It's kind of a little game that he had created to where he's mashing up different cartoon characters, and you kind of have to guess, you know, where the parts come from. Snoopy's ears, Betty Boop's eyes, Tintin's hair, you know, so on and so forth. I think this is only $5, and if you have somebody who's not just a comics fan, but a cartoon fan, you know, this would be a cool, like, stocking stuffer gift or something like that. This is only 3.5 inches. You know, something you could stick in a postcard or whatever. And, you know, it's got the answer legend on the back, you know, test your knowledge a little bit. It doesn't explicitly say what pieces are what. So you still have to kind of do a little bit of research if you want to know for sure. But this is honestly a really cool idea. Other thing that I picked up from is going to be Octobriana. I guess you would categorize this as an outlaw comic. He has the outlaw comic badge there. There isn't a lot of gore in this per se, but there's definitely some black ink slinging going on, some violence and whatnot. Reminds me of a precursor to Street Angel. I don't know what came first. I would assume that this had come first. There are different versions of this book that he had done in different inks. So there's like a retro colored style. There is a black and white style. That's what we're looking at here. And there is like a neon ink colored version as well. But this is a cool comic. If you're into black and white, I'd probably recommend to get this into black and white. I think it works best that way. All right, so this is just Walking Dead #1, Wizard World. I think this is from 2015. That's Jim Rugg variant cover. Rambo 3.5. This is kind of a reimagining, or I don't want to call it alternate history of Rambo after Part 3. I have a lot of Jim's books. I have pretty much everything up to this point. I think this is the best thing he's ever put out. This thing is so funny. It's hard to describe how funny it is. It's extremely witty. There are some things in here that right away, ooh baby, playing with hot topics. But yeah, it's basically just kind of a funny story about Rambo and George Bush and this weird kind of like love story, I guess, that they have together. I really don't want to spoil the rest of it, but like I said, if you're a fan of Jim Rugg and you don't own this is the oversized version. There is a 3.5 version, hence the name. It's, you know, a mini comic. It really speaks on the oversized version. If you guys don't own this already, I think this is the must-buy book to have in your collection. Okay, so we're gonna move on to magazine size. This is the Spirit magazine. This came out through Warren. You know, they did Eerie, Vampirella, Creepy, so on and so forth. These are reprints of Will Eisner's Spirit. Sort of in that magazine format that you're familiar with other Warren magazines. So if you're a fan of Will Eisner, you know, these are must-buys in my opinion. There's also the Will Eisner quarterlies that Kitchen Sink had put out that are somewhat similar to this. I think Will Eisner is an all-time master with his expressions, especially in his eyes. There's a lot that you can pick up from his art. So I definitely recommend the Spirit if you're not familiar with it. There's a bunch of different versions of the Spirit that are out there. I recommend the Warren magazines, and like I said, there's the Kitchen Sink reprints as well that are floating around out there that I would recommend getting. Will Eisner's master. Heavy metal is one of my favorites. I love anthology books. We were talking about Freak Brothers, talking about heavy metal. You know, we've talked about Ice Cream Man in past videos that I've done. I love anthology books. So heavy metal is exactly one of those. It's just a, bunch of stories. There's interviews and whatnot that's also in here. Very uh, adult, forward thinking for its time, especially. And I still think to this day there's not very many comics or magazines that get close to the quality of heavy metal. Particular reason why I picked up this issue, July 1983, the cover of Ran Xerox. So this is I guess I would categorize it as a cyberpunk comic, post-future style. And I had initially had this on my list to track down, and I finally found it in a back issue bin. But he's this character in Xerox. He's in a couple of issues of Heavy Metal. I think they ran like 6 issues of the story in full to get it. And then as well, I picked up November 1977. Sick cover. On the topic of heavy metal, where they got Savage Tales. So this is a Marvel magazine, as you can see. They're just ripping off heavy metal. Heavy metal was the zeitgeist at the time, was extremely popular. As you can see, it's just a heavy metal ripoff for the most part. Doesn't mean that there's not good stuff in here. This issue didn't have anything too crazy in it. Nothing really had honestly caught my eye. There's a couple of things in here that were pretty cool. This story here, I really like the art on. Will Junkins. Cool stuff. And then this is number 1, and then I got a number 3 as well. The comic shop didn't have a number 2. Figured to pick up the first couple of issues of this and kind of check it out. It's cheaper. Obviously, it's way cheaper than heavy metal. If you're looking to get something similar to heavy metal, honestly, I would save your money. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend picking these up. You can spend that $10 elsewhere and pick up a later issue of heavy metal rather than getting this. It's more of an oddity. I like to collect weird things. This is I guess you would call it like a program for Fantasy Fair. This would have been 1982. You find things like this floating around every once in a while, and I really like things like this because you get stories and art that typically you're not going to find anywhere else but in these, because they were made specifically for these, as promotion. You also find interviews. You can find, maps of the actual, look at that, Will Eisner. Yeah, so you can see there's things like this that are in it where you can see like the schedule, where it breaks down the day, kind of the layout of the convention itself. The big guest here at this convention would have been Frank Miller at the time. That would have been 1982, so he was at the height of his powers pretty much. Yeah, it's just a cool little oddity that I picked up. I have a couple of things like this. And you can find weird magazines, fanzines, and things like that out there floating around with things like this. All right, Howard the Duck magazines. So I already have a couple issues of this, so I just keep going. I think there's 12 in total. I want to say that I have more than half of them now at this point. So same thing, these are black and white 70s comics. As you can see, there's a theme here. I love black and white outlaw, black and white 70s comics. Just kind of what I enjoyed. You can see we got Man Thing here. They are adult stories, I would say. Hence the reason why these were put into magazine formats. Howard the Duck, they wanted to dodge the comics code in the 70s going into the 80s as well. So to skirt having to censor their work for children, they turned the comics into a magazine size. That way they can skirt the comics code authority and basically make whatever the hell they want and not get told what they can and can't do. Little workaround that they have. But Howard the Duck magazines, I highly recommend picking these up. They're a little pricey. They're about $10 to $15 a piece, roughly. And like I said, there's about 12 of them, so it does add up a little bit over time. But if you pick up, an issue here and there, 12 issues isn't a lot to really really collect. So if you do see any of these out in the wild, I would definitely recommend to pick them up. And this just happens to be another issue of it there. All right, so RoboCop 2 movie adaptation. The first RoboCop movie is definitely one of my all-time favorites, probably in a top 10, if not top 20 movie for me of all time. RoboCop 2 is an okay movie. It's definitely not as good as the first one. This comic, I'm just gonna be honest with you guys, if you ever see this thing out in the wild, I don't think there's anything really redeeming in this, to be truthful with you. Mark Bagley, you know, he did Spider-Man, Venom, and whatnot. And I don't know why, but I don't see his art style in this. And when you think about RoboCop, you know, you think about violence, gore, satire, so on and so forth. This is so watered down and sterilized down to like the corporate level. It's just like, why are you reading a RoboCop comic if none of those elements are in there that make RoboCop great? So you ever see this thing floating out in the wild, I would pass on it. You can find it for in between $1 and $5. This thing was near mint, so it was a $5 book. I wouldn't bother picking this thing up. It's not cool. The cover, sick, but that's all it's got going for it. So these collector editions, that you can see here, they are things that I picked up from Barnes & Noble. Mad magazines are getting harder and harder to find. You know, they've been around forever, and they get pretty pricey. You know, I have one here from 1970. You know, it was $20. It's like, that's just one issue, and there's a million of these things out there. It's what these newsstand mads are that DC puts out. They are essentially greatest hits, and then as well they'll include, I don't know, like 10 to 15 new pages of material towards the back. It's still Mad Magazine, but they're a greatest hits version, and they're square bound, so they're a nicer quality. I see people give these shit online. It's like, oh, why don't they just reprint the Mads over again? Again, there's been so many different issues of Mad. That would be such a undertaking. Could they make a compendium or something like in between your year whatever 1970 to 1980? Yeah, probably. And that would be a cool thing to have, but those would still be massive books and extremely thick because of just how thick in general Mads are. So I don't even know if that's something that's even logistically makes sense to them. And you get kind of like cool little articles and backgrounds about Mad and the history of Mad. Some of the different things that might be in there. These have a bad rap from what I've seen online. I don't get it. I think that they're well worth your money, especially if you're into Mad, because like I said, Mads are extremely expensive at this point in time. And if you can just get the best of Mad, you don't have to go through, the garbage that might be out there. Ironic. That saves you a lot of time and money. I don't understand the hate on these, and I actually highly recommend to pick them up if you're a fan of Mad. Just wanted to show a quick drawing in here. So this is Tom Bunk. I discovered him through Mad, and the dude just has crazy style. It's very underground to me. It reminds me of Robert Crumb a lot. But if you guys want to pause it here and just take a look at it, there is so much that's going on in here. And every time I look at this, I find something new that I didn't see before. It's one of those types of drawings. So yeah, guys, thank you for hanging out and taking a look at my haul. This is probably something that I'll continue doing. When I get a stack of them, we'll just go through them real quick. You guys get an idea of what you may like that I like as well. Again, thanks for hanging out. Have a good day.